Bora vai. Bora vai. So, what I'm saying was previously, previously, so previously I was working with in discussing and writing uh, tire friction without considering temperature. And then we know that the friction is defined by bulk of the properties and surface roughness properties, especially statistical properties of the surface. Sure. So, in this case, in this case, we for assuming self-affine fractal surface, hard rough substrate, we consider a range of wave vector to work. Because if I keep continuing increasing my magnification, increasing, I will reach a point that there is no contact area because the contact area keep reducing. So I need QL, the lower bound wave vector, and Q1 upper bound wave vector. QL is quite easy to define. It is the size of the rubber block. If it is a rubber block, it is the side of the rubber block. If it is a tire, it is the size of a tread block of the tire. So easy. And the point is which is my upper bound for tire wear. This is the point. And now I have to answer my tutor. It's very sensitive situation. See. So in this case, per bound. I have to check this password. Just a second. Okay, let's check this password. Save. Okay. So, we have to check how we define the upper bound. There are, in this case, we cannot use an atomic scale. It's not necessary, even since for tires it is too much. But we can use this wave vector will change according to the surface roughness. So if my surface is rough, actually not rough, if considering unusual asphalt, we know that an asphalt road or concrete road, any road, is not pure asphalt, pure concrete. There are contaminants. And what does it mean? Does it mean that these contaminants will work as an interface, a sort of interface between the tire, rubber surface, tread surface, and the road surface? So the particles of these contaminants fills the cavities between the asperities. If the asperities have a wavelength, a size, which is smaller than the diameter of these particles, so these particles will block the no, these particles will avoid the contact of the rubber with the bottom of the asperities. And this is the problem. This is a big problem because it reduces the friction, the possibilities of friction, of contact area, pressure, and dust friction, and also reduces the roughness of the surface. So, in the end, less grip, less tire grip. Okay. Conversely, when the surface is very smooth, no, it's not smooth. When the asphalt, when the road is when the surface road or the road surface is uncontaminated, let's put uncontaminated. In other words, very clean. The upper wave vector cut off Q1 will change. In this case, it will be more influenced by the rubber compound. In this case, actually, when I have a very clean surface, it really depends more on the rubber. Why? As the tire is being used, the surface is being worn. Okay, the surface is being worn, and then the it creates a layer of a degraded rubber, because when rubber is worn, that surface it's more exposed to chemical degradation due to the environment and so on. It creates a sort of very thin layer called dead layer. What is the problem of this dead layer? The problem is that this layer has no contributions to friction, or at least they are very weak. And this is the problem. So, what if this layer is uh, generated due to wear and friction, where this depends on the rubber properties, surface roughness, this layer will change its properties, its size, and so on, according to the road surface. So it changes, this layer changes according to the type of the road. So let's write this. In this case, it will be more influenced by the road compound. This compound since during operation the stresses and the local stresses and temperature due to no, the local stresses and temperature motivate the formation of a layer. This layer is very weak, no, negligible contribution to the friction or tire grip. Good. Um, Yes, rubber friction. The thickness of this layer is influenced by the road surface roughness, which is defined by mostly by the power spectral density. Power spectral density CQ. Q, imbecil. Nice. Very nice. Let's check how the PDF is. Okay, now I will discuss the part of tire friction considering temperature. This is very important. Okay. Now I will study this part of rubber friction with flash temperature. And I prefer to read quietly and then comment. Or I don't know, I do what I will want in the moment. By now I prefer to read quietly. we can make some comments. So, with when considering rubber friction using the flash temperature, the author Pearson um, started his theory with the diffusion equation, and I see if I could share here. Here, rubber friction with flash temperature. Let's create the cattura di finestra. And I'm here. And okay, so when so Pearson uh, works with this equation, the uh, heat diffusion one, heat diffusion equation, and he starts his theory from this point. So considering a rubber block with flat surface in contact and contact no sliding friction situation against a hard hot substrate. Okay, so let's highlight this here. Okay, so and the author consider that exists an asperity contact with a diameter d. During sliding at velocity v, the asperity will generate pulsating forces, which we already know. And these pulsating forces are characterized by a frequency, which we already know. Which is this frequency? We will divide the to obtain this frequency. Actually, this frequency is not equal. It is in the same order of magnitude of the velocity of sliding divided by the asperity size, lateral size d, which I mentioned previously. Let's call this omega 0. So, which results in an energy dissipation in a volume element. And this volume element has a size in the order of d equal in the order of d at the power of 3 volume. So volume in it has the same magnitude order that d at the power of 3. Okay, nice. If the velocity v is high enough, negligible heat fusion will take place during the time period d divided by v. Here I'm dividing the a length per velocity, so I will just have seconds or hours or time. So the time period is d divided by v. And the temperature increase in the rubber diffusion will take place during this time. The temperature increase in the rubber in the vicinity of the asperity will be delta T, approximately equal to Q divided by rho CV, which is this parameter here. Which is this one. What is this? Q is the energy. Rho is the density, and CV is, I think, is the specific heat. And yeah, here, specific heat. So, and amount of frictional heat energy. So, as I said, okay. And then I can calculate the temperature locally, flash temperature, using this equation. The heat diffusion is negligible when some assumptions are obeyed. For that, my contact time, d divided by v, will be smaller than the diffusion time, which is given by the square value divided by d capital letter. D capital letter is Reed diffusivity, as you see in the screen. So D capital letter equals to lambda divided by rho times Cp. Okay, so if my effective contact time is smaller than diffusion time, this is positive for negligible heat diffusion. But there is another condition. Or not, I don't know. Okay, here he gives an example. Another form to give this definition of contact time with respect to the diffusion one is by considering that the velocity times the distance is bigger than the heat diffusivity, the capital letter. Okay. Pearson says that if heat diffusivity is bigger than 0.1, heat diffusion will be important. If now we have the second, maybe the second assumption, which is d bigger divided by heat diffusion divided by the velocity. If the length of the asperity is bigger than this quotient, then probably the heat diffusion will be important. However, after the substrate asperity contact is broken, substrate asperity rubber contact is broken, the peak temperature will decrease, and the temperature distribution will broaden with increasing time, in a way determined by the heat diffusion equation. However, as to the substrate, asperity rubber contact is broken, the peak temperature will decrease. This is quite obvious. Okay. And the temperature distribution will broaden with increasing time in a way determined by the heat diffusion equation. Okay. Okay. And then Pearson will perform two developments of this theory. One is for the conceptual case, which is single length scale, and the other for multi-length scale. I think the single length one is very useful to understand some stuff, so I will bring this first case. So considering a case with randomness on a single length scale, lambda 0 equal 2p divided by q0, and with root mean square roughness amplitude, and this is the first one of three main parameters for surface roughness: h0, okay, which is the RMS surface roughness amplitude, okay. Amplitude. The other is h0 prime. I think it's h0 prime, which is the curvature of the asperity, the roughness asperity, and the other is the power spectral density. Okay, so let's continue. The surface roughness power spectrum will be given by this equation that he puts in the text. The average radius of curvature that I show you is r, and then is approximately equal to 1 divided by q0 square value times h0. Okay. So as we know, the contact diameter is d. The author also assumed no roughness on a smaller length scale than the size given in the figure 7, which is this figure here. He is considering a situation like this, so just a single length scale. Which means that there is just this? No, the others are exactly equal to this aspect. Okay, let's continue. During this time, okay, so smaller length scale. The time it takes to slide a distance d is d divided by v. During this time, the heat energy produced in the volume element, the cubic, at the asperity, is given by me Fn d, which is the friction energy, guys. Where Fn is sigma d square value, is the normal asperity load, is the load, is normal load over the asperity. Sigma is the average perpendicular stress in the contact area, sometimes named pressure. Thus, the energy production per unit is Q me Fn times d, all divided by the cubic value. Me, this is equal to me divided by sigma, which is the pressure or perpendicular stress. Since we neglected heat diffusion, our delta T is Q divided by whole CV, which is me sigma divided by whole CV. And then um, the friction coefficient will be just a modification of the previous friction coefficient given at the single scale. The most interesting part here, we and then in this case is not considering that polar coordinates, not as actually it is, but without cosine because it's all the same spanities. And then sigma is also q0 times the amplitude of the surface roughness times the elastic modulus considering frequency and temperature. Thus, friction is this one. Okay, and then it is quite easy to put on these equations to calculate the temperature variation in here also. T0 is the background temperature. The main point is complex elastic modulus depends on the local temperature. And this is the point that Pearson includes the LLF transformation, which was developed by Williams Landau Ferry in 1955 paper. Okay, and then using the equations provided by William Landau Ferry, we can describe this function for the elastic modulus. Since the friction coefficient is defined by the frequency and also temperature, we can here put these two coefficients AT, okay, which is from the Landau-Ferry equations, and then we can include the variation of the temperature considering also the environment temperature and the glass transition one. Okay. So the author mentions this figure. This is the basic figure of rubber in the rubber behavior considering frequency and temperature. As temperature increases, rubber changes from its rubbery behavior to its glassy behavior. What is the characteristics? Basically soft and glassy stiff. And then we have a transition uh, medium, the transition size, no, the transition range of velocities, which is give us, if we will see that it is inside the transition region, which we have important values for target grid. Let's take a look. So in this plot we have E1. No, not in this plot actually. In this plot we have E, which is elastic modulus, complex elastic modulus, which is a function of friction. And then we can see here viscoelastic elastic modulus E1 plus I, the complex number, times E2. This is the typical elastic modulus for a rubber-like material or an elastomer. And you have E2 divided by E1, where E2 is the imaginary part of the elastic modulus and E1 is the real part of the elastic. These are given by the imaginary elastic part. And then when we divide this, we can obtain the loss tangent. So at low frequency, as I mentioned it, the material behaves as a Hubble one. In other words, it is soft, it is elastic, it is more like the usual rubbers that we see. Actually, it is even more tacky than the rubbers that we used to see and use. But at very high frequencies, the material is elastically very stiff. So stiff that it becomes brittle, easily, easy to break. In this glassy region, the real elastic modulus is again linearly constant, as we see here. The real elastic modulus rises with frequency until a point in the it's already in very high. No. This is the oh god. The real elastic modulus at high frequency is basically constant. The imaginary elastic modulus rises with the frequency, with the velocity, with the height. So at some point it reaches a peak in the beginning of the glassy region and decay. So this means that we have an optimal point. An optimal point in which the rubber reaches a condition which is elastic and stiff at the same time. Not so elastic, but not so stiff, but still providing outstanding characteristics for many applications in engineering environments. In the Hubble region, the real elastic modulus is about 3-4 orders of magnitude higher. The intermediate range, and this is quite important, the transition region, as I said, the loss tangent is very large. So the loss tangent is very large because it is the division. And so I lost. Whereas here. And it is mainly this region which determines the friction when a tire is sliding on a road surface. Why? Because let's see, if we are here, we see a very large friction or elastic modulus for real part, and high contribution from the imaginary part. So summing these two, we have a quite relevant elastic modulus. Okay, but in the flash temperature, it depends, as you see, on perturbed frequency. So as we see here, omega 0, and omega 0, and temperature. Okay, so it depends on the perturbed frequency. If this is smaller or larger than the frequency omega 1, which is frequency omega 1. Omega 1 is the frequency caused by the upper bound wave vectors. Okay? Where the imaginary part of E complex elastic modulus, now in function of temperature, divided by real part is maximal. This is the omega 1. which is when it is obtained the maximum division between the imaginary part and this real part. No, wait, it's not. Yeah, imaginary divided by real. And this is the quite important point because the temperature increase and also the theory of William, when we the double LF transform, when we increase temperature, what the transformation does? It shifts the curve. It shifts the curves according to the values obtained with a higher temperature. But since an increase in temperature, T0 tending to be T bigger than T0, so if I have an increase in temperature which is higher than T0, which is the environment temperature, this increase shifts the viscoelastic spectrum to higher frequencies. As we see the function, so if omega 0 is lower than omega 1, the flash temperature will decrease the friction. And this is the point, this is because it depends on temperature and frequency. Omega 0, as we see, is, let's write here, omega 0 is order of magnitude of V divided by D, right? Here, omega 0 is the same order of magnitude of V divided by V. But also, we can also define it as omega 0 equal V divided by Q0. Okay? And then, if omega 0 is higher than omega 1, which is frequency where the division, the loss tangent is maximum, the flash temperature will decrease. The flash temperature will decrease the friction coefficient. Nice. Okay. But no, if the omega 0 is lower, is lower than omega 1. If omega 0 is bigger, let's restart. If omega 0 is lower than omega 1, the flash temperature will decrease the friction. Okay. If omega 0 is higher than omega 1, which is the frequency where the loss tangent is maximum, the flash temperature will increase the friction. So the friction increases. And this is the point when discussing tires. because omega 0 in tires is always below omega 1. It's not enough. It's not enough to cause this effect. So, when temperature rises in tires, friction decreases, tends to decrease. And then I stop, it starts sliding. I will rest a bit, some break. I will, oops, what the fuck? Okay. Well, tava demorando. OBS dando, as always, OBS having issues, normal. So, I will have a 10-15 minutes break. We'll stop the transmission here. And then I start to write in the next one. But we also, this is the point. This topic, just this topic for flash temperature on rubber friction counts for stationary sliding. And it is rather big, but too numerical and non-stationary sliding. Okay? Okay. Okay. Let's step by step. See you in the next video. Bye. Some minutes. In some minutes.